and beyond their sell-by date. And perhaps the Pakistani military establishment wants the known figureheads to be seen as acting upon these figureheads and these big terror tanzeems because of the Financial Action Task Force, which has put some very stringent conditions on it for the year 2025. Nearly 900 plus such institutions need to be dismantled, and they are operating within Pakistan and also in the neighborhood region in Afghanistan, where they seem to be regrouping. So Bilawal Bhutto Zardari is clearly trying to endear himself to the West, trying to
Good evening, you're watching Tacks. I'm Zakka Jacob. In the next few hours, we will know if India and the United States have managed to clinch a trade deal, even if it is a limited one. At 9:30 p.m. India time, Trump will start signing letters to countries, both to those countries with whom the US has managed to clinch a deal so far, and also to the ones that he has not managed to hammer out a deal with yet. He will be intimating these countries in the first tranche, about a dozen odd countries, about the tariffs which will take effect from the 1st of August. The big question is, will India be able to crack a deal with Donald Trump? If not, if this deal doesn't come through, then what kind of tariffs is India looking at? Is it looking at a 26% tariff? Now, Trump is also threatening another additional 10% for all BRICS countries, and India is the I in BRICS. So does that mean that India will have to now look at 36% tariffs for all exports into the United States? What are the red lines for India, particularly when it comes to agricultural produce? And surprisingly, why are the markets still holding steady if starting the 1st of August, which is 3 weeks from now, India will have to shell out a third in tariffs, and vice versa? If India decides to go with reciprocal tariffs on American goods, then American goods will also start getting charged at a third of their cost. So the question is, why then are the markets factoring this fear in?
Sending letters out on Monday having to do with the trade deals. Could be 12, maybe 15. You know, Secretary of Commerce right here. And I guess Howard, I would say it could be maybe as many as 15 or so. And they'll be going out on Monday, and some will go out on Tuesday and Wednesday, and and we've made deals also. So we're going to have a combination of letters, and some deals have been made.
So India currently is subject to what is called a 10% tariff, baseline tariff on select goods. If no agreement is reached, then there will be what is called the reciprocal tariff, which Trump announced on the 2nd of April and then put on a pause for a 90-day period starting April 9th. That, of course, expires on the 9th of July, which is later this week. So the reciprocal tariff for India was 16%. And then now you have this whole new threat that Trump has added, which is another 10% for all BRICS-aligned countries, including those members who are part of BRICS. So what that means is, if he goes through with what he calls these anti-American BRICS policies, if he goes through with the total gamut of tariffs for Indian goods, that could push India's tariff burden for all exports into the United States to 36%. So basically, Indian companies will have to factor in an extra third of their cost of manufacturing, or at least the price of manufacturing, into the export goods that they're planning to send to the United States. But India has a plan in place if at all this deal is not reached, and there is a 50-50 chance that a deal could likely not be reached before that deadline of 9th of July. Diversifying the markets is one way to try and offset this possible tariff burden. The government has also asked exporters and manufacturers to look at other emerging as well as advanced markets. India has, remember, tied up a deal with the UK, an FTA with the UK, which could likely get signed by the end of this month when the Prime Minister is expected to visit London. More SEZs are expected to be set up, expanded to boost further exports. Indian producers are finding newer and newer markets, particularly for toys and fruits. Made in India toys are now being exported to over 150 countries. Fruits, whether it's lychees from Pathankot being exported to Qatar, jamun, mango, cherries and oranges are being exported to West Asia. Recently, there was also a National Skill Olympiad, which was held to try and boost seafood exports and promote value addition within that particular industry. Now, last week, after the Indian negotiating team headed by the Commerce Secretary Rajesh Agarwal returned from the United States, this is what the Commerce Minister had to say, that India cannot be forced into a timeline of another country. India will arrive at a deal in India's interest in its own time and pace.
मैंने आपको कई बार बताया कि भारत अपने शर्तों पर चर्चा करता है, अलग अलग देशों के साथ चर्चा चल रही है। फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट तभी संभव होता है जब दो तरफा फायदा हो। इट शुड बी अ विन विन एग्रीमेंट। और जब भारत के इंटरेस्ट को सुरक्षित रखते हुए नेशनल इंटरेस्ट विल ऑलवेज बी सुप्रीम, वो ध्यान में रखते हुए अच्छा अगर डील बनती है तो भारत तो विकसित देशों के साथ डील करने के लिए कभी भी तैयार है।
So let's look at what the sticking points are, because at the end of the day, India and America are strategic partners. Why can't both countries find a common ground for this sticky issue of trade? 4 rounds of negotiations have taken place so far between India and the United States. There are some sticking points. Chief among them, the main contention is around the entry of American genetically modified crops, particularly soybean and maize, which the Trump administration wants India to import. India has so far drawn a line at that. That is a red line for India. Here's a quick explainer as to why India is opposed to genetically modified crops, which America wants India to loosen up on. So, the contentious point is about genetically modified crops. The United States wants India to allow the import of GM crops, specifically soybean and maize, and that is a big concern in India. There are fears that GM crops could lead to genetic contamination of indigenous varieties. It could reduce genetic diversity. It could also threaten local ecosystems. Many farmer groups are opposed to GM crops because of concerns that seed patents and corporate control, particularly by foreign biotech giants, could make farmers much more dependent on those foreign seeds as opposed to domestically grown ones. It would also invite dominance by global agro-trading giants, and it would push out domestic processors. In fact, according to GTRI, one of the leading think tanks on international trade here in India, India risks losing its export competitiveness in the European market if it allows genetically modified animal feed imports from the US under this trade deal. If India does allow the entry, it could damage India's image as a GMO-free supplier in sensitive segments like rice and tea, honey, spices, even organic foods. Now, there are fears, like I said, of genetic contamination, forced navigation around. Now, except for cotton, no other genetically modified crop is allowed to be cultivated in India. Now, experts believe that in such a scenario, the question of importing genetically modified soybean or genetically modified corn or maize from the United States for food purposes simply does not arise. In fact, the only crop that is allowed genetically modified to be imported into India was BT cotton. It was approved in 2002. Originally, it was developed by a controversial company called Monsanto. Later, Monsanto got acquired by Bayer. That collaboration happened with another company called Mahiko. So for the last 20-odd years, initially what was seen was BT cotton has some inbuilt resistance to bollworm. That's a major cotton pest, particularly in the Vidarbha and other parts of India where cotton is grown. As of date, over 90% of the cotton that's grown in India is BT cotton. But it has shown mixed results. Initially, it led to higher yields and reduced pesticide use. But over time, what has happened is secondary pests started developing some kind of a build-up resistance, and that has undermined some of the benefits that we've seen initially with the use of BT cotton. Also, controversially, farmer suicides in cotton belts like Vidarbha have been controversially linked to the use of BT cotton, particularly in the last 20-odd years. So, under this trade deal, the United States is basically telling India that it wants an entry for genetically modified soybean and corn. Now, India currently doesn't import any genetically modified crops. Like I said, there's only BT cotton that's been allowed so far. Neither soybean nor corn are approved for cultivation or to be imported as food. The only exception that was made, and this happened a few years ago when there was a shortage of processed oils, refined oils, genetically modified canola and GM modified soybean are allowed only for oil processing, for oil refining to make processed oil here in India. America wants this deregulated for food imports, and that is something that India is loath to conceding. We'll go across to Sanjay Suri, who's joining us. So, Sanjay, we're counting down. Maybe in an hour, hour and a half, we'll know whether or not that limited trade deal between India and the United States will come through. Trump has said that to 12 countries he'll be signing letters. Some of them deals will be announced, some others tariff rates will be announced. What are you picking up in terms of the latest? Because the language from both sides, at least in the last few days over the weekend, etc., has seemingly hardened a bit.
Well, we've had Scott Bessent saying that now we are very close to a deal. But the fact is that if we are talking of the end of the 90-day period, there were 56 countries on that sort of 90-day list. And we've had almost nothing with any country so far. There's been a limited deal with Britain, a deal with Vietnam a couple of days back. That's very iffy by the sound of it. 20% tariff for Vietnamese exports and imports from the US completely duty-free. That's not a model many countries can follow, certainly not India. So with all the others, all this is still hanging as it is with India. And we have had that July 9th deadline now extended till the 1st of August. In effect, we've had that word from Howard Lutnick, the US Commerce Secretary. So the issue with the deal with India certainly is going down to the wire as it is with many countries. And the difficulty is not just demands that are arising within the negotiations. And those are absolute demands. The US wants everything on its own terms, certainly under Trump. He has said that he wants to open up India, nothing less than that. But there are other factors that have arisen, like the statement that any country that is taking the BRICS approach that is perceived as anti-American will have another 10%. So there is now that reminder really of a danger that's always hovered above these talks. What if you agree a deal with the US, everything is signed on the dotted line and everything is in place? Suddenly Trump says, okay, I didn't like what you said, another 10%. So there is that question that is hanging over this, and that adds to a continuing problem with the US over compliance and certification. Whenever there's a dispute, who decides? Certainly we can forget about WTO.
All right.
The US position has been that it will decide. It will be what it says it is. So that is also a continuing concern, how this is going to be regulated and implemented, whatever is agreed.
All right, Sanjay, we'll leave it at that. I guess, there's a little bit of geopolitics happening here as well. So the deal with the US may or may not come through, but the Prime Minister is firming up plans to visit London later this month, where the India-UK FTA could be signed by both sides. They'd agreed to that a few weeks ago. Whether or not the dates will come through, we'll have to wait and see. But I think India is also trying to send out a signal that, look, the United States is not the only advanced market out there that we're interested in doing business with or that we're dependent on. We're looking at other markets as well. All right, so what can one expect if a deal were to go through between India and the United States, even if it's a limited trade deal, and what if one does not come through? I'm now joined by veteran market expert, investor, startup mentor, Mr. Ajay Bagga. Thank you very much, Mr. Bagga, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. Let's deal with the worst case scenario. We will know in the next few hours whether there is a deal or not. What if there is no deal? How will the markets react tomorrow morning?
Yeah, Zakka, what has changed from April? We were at an extreme panic zone. After 2nd April, global markets were in extreme panic. Now we are at qualified unease. If you look at, we have something called option positioning in the markets. That gives you an idea of how much fall are the markets forecasting. It's less than 1% for European markets, for US markets, even in Indian markets. And it's not complacency. It's a qualified unease. One, Trump has moved the date to August 1st, even though they are saying we will issue letters, and they are saying, no, we are not postponing, but it's actually postponed by 22 days to 1st August. Second, they famously said on 9th April that 150 countries are in line for a negotiation with China. So 2.5 deals out of 90 is all they've done. Third, for India, India is holding its horses, as are the European Union, Japan, South Korea. All the trading partners are seeing that the Chinese method of negotiating in a tough manner is much better than the UK, where UK tried to appease Trump, but till now they're not very clear on the contours of their policy, and they're not getting relief on steel or aluminum, or even on their automobiles.
But tell me, Mr. Bagga, for India, the sort of red line seems to be agricultural products, certain products like soybean and corn, etc. We've discussed in great detail about why those are red lines for India. And India is hoping that, if it came down to that, if India had to make some concessions there, at least Trump would concede on steel and aluminum. What has gone wrong with that bargain?
I don't think it will happen. India cannot afford it, and as you said, enough reasons for that. But the basic reason, it will kill your farm economy, because the US goods will come at 50% off at a very high quality. Some will be genetically modified, but they have huge hidden subsidies, which we can't counter. So it will kill your agrarian economy. It's political suicide. It will not happen. Second is on steel, Zakka, where they have an FTA with Australia for multiple years. They are levying 25% on steel, 50% on aluminium. Even on UK, where they have signed a deal, a so-called deal, it's still 25%, 50%. With Canada, where they had an old agreement which Trump had signed in 2020 and has gone back on, he's charging 50% on aluminium on Canadian smelters. So it's not coming. It won't happen. It will be largely a 10% tariff for the entire world with sectoral carve-outs, steel, aluminium, automobile parts. Japan, for example, is holding out for relief on automobile parts and auto, because that's 8% of their GDP, their exports of cars into the US. And Trump is not ready to move on that. And Japan has an election this year, so they've just postponed the talking. They have been very polite, but they have been very tough.
All right, Mr. Bagga, we'll leave it to that. Trump, of course, now threatening another 10% extra on BRICS countries. But we'll see. We'll know, like I said, in the next few hours, whether or not there is a deal, whether there is no deal. And if there is no deal, as Mr. Bagga was saying, the markets seem to have sort of factored that in. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Talking about good deals, this is something that you need to pay attention to, particularly if you're in the affluent class of Indian citizens. The United Arab Emirates has launched a nomination-based golden visa, specifically aimed at Indian citizens. Now, the best part of this is it removes the need for hefty investments that you have to make into real estate or buying property in Dubai or starting a business in Dubai. In fact, the updated visa program includes a much wider range of professionals and specialists and, frankly, executives, management executives that the UAE wants to invite. The Golden Visa expansion is a smart strategic step by the United Arab Emirates to tap into India's massive talent pool, particularly in the tech sector, in the startup space, in innovation, and of course in the creative economy. It also strengthens people-to-people ties. Remember, already there are about, I think, 8 or 9 million people of Indian origin who live in the entire wider Middle East. And that makes the relocation for many Indians and Indian families much more easier, possibly even more meaningful for Indian professionals. Dubai is not too far away from India. It's just a 4-hour flight from most major airports. The program also aligns with emerging global trends, giving preference to skills over wealth. Also focusing on sectors where India and Indian professionals are already leading, whether it is content creation, artificial intelligence, green innovation. So let's bring you up to speed with what is the difference between the old visa norm, the old golden visa, and the new golden visa norm. India's inclusion in this pilot project reflects growing ties between both UAE and India. Here's what has changed. The earlier pathway required a minimum investment of 2 million UAE dirhams. That is close to about 4.5, almost 5 crores. You had to invest that either buying a property, invest that in real estate, or you had to start a new business, register a new business in the UAE to the turnover of 4.5 crores. The new initiative, the new Golden Visa, does not have any of those conditions. It simply simplifies long-term residency for eligible Indians. Your professional background, your societal contributions will be looked at. The appeal is going beyond traditional high net worth individuals or HNIs. By offering lifetime residency at a lower entry cost, it's roughly about 20 odd lakhs, 23 lakhs, the move is expected to attract much more younger professionals and also mid-level investors from India who are seeking greater lifestyle flexibility, global mobility and tax advantages. Remember, you pay 0% income tax in Dubai for whatever income you earn there. These investors also may be encouraged to invest in mid-segment properties in Dubai, spurring that particular market, because earlier, like I said, you had to invest at least a minimum of 2 million UAE dirhams and buy a property there or start a business to the turnover of 2 million UAE dirhams. If not, you couldn't get permanent residency. So the question now becomes, what's in it for Indian working professionals? The Golden Visa offers a range of long-term benefits. Number one, you get permanent residency in the UAE. You don't require visa or immigration checks. You just walk in and walk out, much like you have permanent residency for Indians in Hong Kong and other places, in some places. There's also freedom to work and start a business. It's like what used to be the US green card. You can live and work in this particular country. You can start a business provided you have this golden visa. It also means, and this is a very important one, particularly for Indian working professionals, the said individual can then sponsor family members. So if you have a wife and children going to school, etc., then you have the ability to sponsor them and then bring them over to the UAE and start your family. There's also the option to employ domestic staff and drivers. Again, that used to be a big problem, a support system, particularly if you have young children in your household. That used to be a big problem earlier living in the UAE, but now even that is being taken care of in this new Golden Visa program. My colleague is now explaining to you why the UAE has done this and what's in it for Indian professionals.
Contrary to what the older rules were, where only the elite, the wealthy, the investors, the industrialists could apply for a UAE residency program, you can now expect workers from India, which includes skilled labor, particularly scientists, researchers, teachers, nurses, and interestingly, even content creators like podcasters, YouTubers, all of them will be allowed to apply for even a residency program. Remember, it's very interesting because this is now going to become one of the topmost destinations for South Asians. As I highlighted, UAE happens to be one of the countries which represent one of the largest expatriate Indian population. At the same time, it comes at a very critical juncture. Donald Trump has already announced that only the elite and wealthy will be able to apply to the United States under the Golden Visa, which is going to cost $5 million. UAE, of course, is now going to also become a top destination because they have already done away with the red tapeism. You can now expect a visa to come your way in anything less than a month. At the same time, important to highlight that there are going to be no backlogs, no politics, and no fraud. This is one of the prime reasons why Donald Trump's golden visa is now facing flack compared to its earlier EB5.
All right, moving on now. 2 months since the Pahalgam attack that claimed the lives of 26 innocent civilians, India has now secured the support of BRICS countries in the fight against terror. During the BRICS summit session on peace and security and the reform of global governance, Prime Minister Modi strongly reiterated India's commitment to peace and brotherhood, while at the same time issuing a resolute call for unified global action against terrorism. He also called the terrorist attack in Pahalgam an attack on all of humanity, and that opposing terror cannot be a matter of convenience, it has to be a matter of principle. He also stressed that silent approval or support of terrorism, whether for personal or political gain, must not be tolerated, urging all countries to act decisively and in unison against terrorism.
On the session on peace and security, Honorable Prime Minister underlined that terrorism was a grave threat facing humanity. He underlined that the attack, the Pahalgam attack, terror attack, is an onslaught on the entire humanity. In this context, he noted that all the leaders have condemned Pahalgam terrorist attack. He also noted that those funding, promoting and providing safe havens to terrorists must be dealt with in the harshest terms. Session on strengthening multilateralism, economic, financial affairs and artificial intelligence, Honorable Prime Minister expressed that diversity and multipolarity were valued strengths of the BRICS. He added that BRICS could play an important role in shaping a multipolar world.
The reason why the BRICS statement, the joint statement, is important is because just a couple of weeks ago at the SCO summit, both China and Pakistan joined hands and they omitted a reference to Pahalgam. India managed to get the better of that strategy, at least at the BRICS summit, despite the presence of China, despite Iran and Indonesia being sort of additional to be members in BRICS, and of course, like I said, China's influence. The fact is that all of BRICS in that joint statement almost unequivocally backed India's stand against terrorism. Prime Minister Modi reiterated that Pahalgam was a direct assault on India's dignity. The BRICS statement also condemned the attack unequivocally. The Prime Minister highlighted how terrorism is one of the gravest threats to humanity. The Prime Minister's statement also mentioned how India is committed to combating terror in all its forms and shapes. And finally, the Prime Minister also highlighted that countries should not hesitate in imposing sanctions on terrorists. The BRICS statement said that these countries will combat cross-border terrorism and terror financing, something that at the SCO summit, a stand that countries were loath to taking because of China and Pakistan coming together, and the reference to Pahalgam had to be dropped, so much so the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh refused to sign the joint statement, but that seems to have been amended and corrective action taken at the BRICS summit in Brazil.
On Sunday, BRICS has signed the BRICS declaration that condemned the April 22 terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir, denounced cross-border terrorism but avoided directly criticizing Pakistan for promoting and exporting the menace. The leaders of the BRICS adopted the Rio Declaration during the Bloc 17 summit. Before the declaration, Prime Minister Modi made a strong statement on terrorism at BRICS summit in a session for peace and security. PM Modi said terrorism is the most serious challenge facing humanity today. PM also said the terrorist attack in Pahalgam on 22nd April was a direct assault on the sole identity and dignity of India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also stressed that condemning terrorism must be a matter of principle and not just of convenience. PM Modi also took a dig at China without taking name for trying to shield terrorists based in Pakistan from the United Nations sanctions. This was the second grouping after Quad where strong worded para has been used in a joint statement. Also at a first plenary session, PM Modi bats for Global South and reforms in international institutions. Prime Minister Modi said the Global South has been a victim of double standards when it comes to development, distribution of resources or security related issues. The other two major takeaways from BRICS declaration were: one, condemnation of Israeli strikes on Iran, and also the declaration voiced concern about the unilateral imposition of tariff, which many see as directed towards America. This is the fourth visit of Prime Minister Modi to Brazil, followed by his state visit.
Meanwhile, China did try to block the mention of terror and the Pahalgam attack at the SCO summit, which ended with India not signing the joint statement. But at the BRICS summit, India and its fight against terror prevailed. As its agenda sees no takers, China now seems to be in an overdrive to tell the world that it is still a force to reckon with and that its weapons have been tested on the battlefield. Particularly after Operation Sindoor showed that some of these Chinese arms, whether it's the PL-15s, the missiles, the HQ-9 air defense systems, were simply no match. They failed critically for Pakistan, and they were no match for the indigenous weapon systems that India has developed, like the BrahMos missile or the Akash Tir indigenously developed air defense system. Now, there is a shocking report which has come out in the French press, French military and intelligence report, which has now claimed that after Operation Sindoor, China made it a part of its state policy, a part of its foreign policy, deploying its embassies across the world to promote a disinformation campaign. This campaign was all about sowing doubts about the performance of the French Rafale fighter jets, which India deployed during that 4-day Operation Sindoor between the 7th of May and the 10th of May during this India-Pakistan war that erupted. that particular report by the French also claims that Beijing tried to hammer the reputation and the sales of this 4.5 generation fighter jet that's been developed by France and that India has bought, 36 of them that India bought in the first tranche. It also said that defense attaches in China's various foreign embassies in over 100 countries were given the charge to discredit the Rafale jets and to try and persuade countries not to buy the Rafales, instead buy the Chinese J-10Cs or the JF-17s, which are now the 5th generation jet. The French believe that China wanted to encourage buyers to choose made in China planes over the made in France Rafale. Even though the Rafale is battle-proven, it's been tested in Libya, in Syria, and of course in the latest context in the India-Pakistan conflict, but the Chinese JF-17s and J-10Cs have found limited buyers and certainly not been tested in battle. Meanwhile, this French intelligence report's findings have also come to the fore just 3 days after the Deputy Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Rahul Singh, claimed that China was using Pakistan as a live weapons laboratory during Operation Sindoor, in fact giving it live vectors of India's offensive and defensive positions, even as the Pakistani DGMO was negotiating with his Indian counterpart. Let's listen in to what the Deputy Chief of Army Staff had to say.
Pakistan was the front face. We had China providing all possible support. And it's no surprise, because if you were to look at statistics, in the last 5 years, 81% of the military hardware that Pakistan is getting is all Chinese, 81% of that. And another thing that China perhaps has seen is that he is able to test his weapons against, say, various other weapon systems that are there. It's like a live lab which is available to. So it's a good, that is what is something we have to be very, very cognizant about. When the DGMO level talks were going on, Pakistan actually was mentioning that we know that your such and such important sort of vector is primed and it is ready for action. I would request you to perhaps, pull it back. So he was getting live inputs as far as from China. So that is one place we really need to move fast.
But both China and Pakistan have now made a feeble attempt to deny these claims, whether it's the French intelligence report or the claims made by the Deputy Chief of Army Staff, General Rahul Singh. Beijing has claimed that China-India relations are at a critical stage of improvement right now, and development of its relationship with Pakistan was not directed at any third party. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Army Chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir, and who perhaps has a lot more to lose, has outright denied and rejected that there was any live cooperation between China and Pakistan during Operation Sindoor.
中国和巴基斯坦是传统友好邻邦，防务安全合作是两国正常合作的一部分，不针对第三方。印度和巴基斯坦是搬不走的邻居，也都是中国的重要邻国。一段时间以来，中方密切关注印巴局势发展，积极劝和促谈，维护地区和平稳定。
All right, speaking about China, the more interesting story there, and people are talking about this in hush-hush tones, is the fact that the supreme leader of China, the president of China, Xi Jinping, seems to be missing in action over the last few days, most notably at the 17th BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro. The Chinese president chose to skip that particular BRICS summit. This is the first time in the last 17 years that the Chinese leader, whether it's Xi Jinping or his predecessors, have decided not to attend the BRICS summit. This certainly is the first time that Xi Jinping has decided not to attend the BRICS summit. He's been in power since 2013, so the first time in over 10 years that he has given a miss to this particular BRICS summit. But more than the BRICS summit, there is a lot of chatter in China right now ahead of a summer conclave known as the Beidai-He conclave, which happens every year. And of course, in 2 years' time, there will be the big party Congress in 2027, where Xi Jinping would have officially completed 15 years in power, or 3 terms as president of China and the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. There is now massive chatter in the corridors of power in what is called Zhongnanhai, the center of power in China. There is a lot of chatter about possible devolution of power, possible succession plan being rolled out as to who will succeed Xi Jinping. when he completes 3 terms in power in 2027, and he'll be close to 74 years old at that point of time. Let's listen in to this perspective on why this is important and why India and the US and all other countries should be paying attention to this particular story. This major buzz in Chinese power circles that Xi Jinping's position, either they're putting in place a succession plan for a much younger leader to take over, or his position has become untenable in the wider Chinese Communist Party. According to top intelligence sources, Xi Jinping, now there is a very strong section within the CCP which feels that Xi Jinping is a liability and is not in keeping with China's long-term stability. There is the old guard of the Chinese Communist Party, which seems to be disillusioned with Xi and his rigid ideology, his anti-corruption crusades, all of which have been going on for over 10 years now. This wing, the older wing of the CCP, wants China to come back from this ideological isolation. The feeling within that clique is that Xi Jinping is clinging on to power amid rising internal dissent and failures. His over-centralization, his war against corruption, all of it is being seen as fracturing party unity. Also, the spying on senior party leaders is weakening the institutional morale of top leaders in the CCP. Also, the removal of certain trusted officials and purges, both within the army as well as within the top echelons of the Communist Party, that have deepened further internal insecurity. The older wing of the Chinese Communist Party is aiming to maintain integrity both within the military forces and also a degree of economic control. Now, with Xi Jinping absent, India becomes the sole heavyweight as far as the BRICS is concerned, the on-site leaders summit that is happening in Rio de Janeiro. Let's try and understand why there is this chatter around Xi Jinping missing in action or possibly setting in motion a succession plan, and what this means, not just for BRICS as a forum, but also certainly for geopolitics going forward.
India is trying to negotiate tariff relief, protect $66 billion in exports while avoiding damaging concessions. Financial markets are watching closely. Rupee trading sideways, forex reserves strong with $702.8 billion and bond yields relatively stable. Trade Minister Piyush Goyal has affirmed India won't undermine its economic interests for a rush agreement. PM Modi avoided any direct confrontation with the US at BRICS, while strongly defending WTO norms and global South solidarity. India has carefully distanced itself from aggressive de-dollarization within BRICS, keeping its strategic autonomy while avoiding explicit alignment. Parallel efforts on trade.
Meanwhile, some domestic news. And amid a raging language debate that's going on in Maharashtra, Raj Thakre's party, the MNS, is caught in a controversy that it'll find hard to get out of. Leader of the MNS, Javed Sheikh, his son, was caught on camera abusing a social media influencer in Mumbai. The video shows Rahil Sheikh, that's the name of Javed Sheikh's son. He's seen repeatedly abusing a particular Marathi influencer after she confronted him for hitting her vehicle. Clearly, there was some road rage altercation that was going on between the two of them, and then this led to this massive back and forth, this war of words between this influencer and this MNS leader's son. In this video, the politician's son appears to be half naked. He's not wearing a shirt, certainly, and he also seemingly is under the influence of alcohol. An FIR has now been registered against Rahil Sheikh, but no arrests have been made yet. Let's listen in to what transpired. This happened Sunday night, Monday morning. What exactly happened?
माझी गाडी ठोकलीस ना असा उघडा तू कुठे चालला होतास हे मनसे तुम्ही हे तू कुठला मनसेवाला आहे कुठला आहे शिवसेनावाला आहे मनसे लोक तुम्ही लोक मराठी शिकवता ना रे लोकांना माझा बाप ना महाराष्ट्र राज्य उपाध्यक्ष आहे तुझा बाप महाराष्ट्राचा अध्यक्ष आहे कोण मनसेवाले अच्छा आणि तू दारू पिऊन माझ्या गाडीवर चढणार गाडी ठोकणार पैसे घे अच्छा तुम्हाला शिव्या देतोयस हा दे शिव्या दे गाडीला ठोकलं तू माझ्या गाडीला का ठोकलं काही माफ तू आता बोललास माझा बाप कोण आहे मला बोललास अरे मी थोडासा परप्रांती लोकांना साथ दिला तर काल 200 लोक माझ्या अंगावर आले आज तू माझी गाडी ठोकतोयस आपल्या बापाची धमकी देतोयस तुम्हाला माफ करा माफी नकोय तू दारू पिऊन गाडी का चालवतोयस तू दारू पिऊन गाडी का चालवतोय
उद्या जा ठाण्याला जा जावेदचे कोण आहे विचार आणि तो माझा बाप आहे.
ओके तर म्हणजे जावेद शेखला तुमच्या बापाने सांगितलं का गाडी माझ्यावर गाडी चढवायला चल पाठीमागं उभा राहा.
ड्रायव्हिंग करतोस तू गाडी ठोकली लोकांची इकडे येऊन.
अरे इसके पैसे
150 खाली मध्ये असेल कोण पण तू
तिला पोलीस स्टेशनला आहे ना.
अरे काय घेणार भाई बघून घे मला काय करतात.
हा
तुम्हाला शिव्या देतोय.
शिव्या दिले
मग काय करतोय
काय बोललो
काय
बोललो मला पोलीस स्टेशन मध्ये या माझं काय बघतात बघू.
हा.
Meanwhile, a political firestorm has erupted between US President Donald Trump and billionaire Elon Musk. They used to be best buddies at one point of time. Now they've had a public and very dramatic fallout. After Musk now announced a new political party, which he calls the America Party, Trump has lashed out, calling the move ridiculous and even labeling his former ally as a bit of a train wreck for this political rebellion.
US President Donald Trump had a biting response Sunday to billionaire Elon Musk's move to start a new US political party.
I think it's ridiculous to start a third party. We have a tremendous success with the Republican Party. The Democrats have lost their way, but it's always been a two-party system. So he can have fun with it, but I think it's ridiculous.
It's the latest in the widening rift between the world's most powerful man and its richest that began last month, when Musk started attacking the item at the top of Trump's legislative agenda, a sweeping tax cut and spending bill. That bill was signed into law on Independence Day.
Take over, Elon, just take over.
Musk spent millions of dollars underwriting Trump's 2024 re-election effort and had spearheaded the downsizing agency DOGE, but stepped back in May. Around that time, he said Trump's bill would bankrupt the country and called it a disgusting abomination. Critics say the bill will significantly add to the US debt load and damage the US economy. As their feud escalated, the president threatened to pull billions of dollars that Tesla and SpaceX receive in government contracts and subsidies. There were signs in mid-June Musk was trying to repair his relationship with Trump. Musk posted on X that he had gone too far. But last week, Musk began criticizing Trump's bill again and vowed that in next year's midterms, he would unseat lawmakers who supported it. Then on Saturday, he said he would establish the America Party. A day later, Trump posted that he was saddened to watch Musk go completely off the rails and be a train wreck the past 5 weeks. Meanwhile, investment firm Azoria Partners said on Saturday it will postpone the listing of Tesla ETF, which was set to launch this week. It raised concerns Musk creating a political party posed a conflict with his full-time responsibilities as Tesla CEO. Azoria CEO James Fishback also reiterated his own support for Trump on social media and encouraged the Tesla board to meet immediately to ask Elon to, quote, clarify his political ambitions.
And later tonight, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be at the White House. He'll be meeting with US President Donald Trump. This is their third meeting in the last 5 months since Trump came back for a second term. And Trump has already announced a 60-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. But neither party, neither Israel nor Hamas, seems to be in any hurry to go ahead and implement that ceasefire on the ground. Here's an explainer. Israel has now reshaped the face of the Middle East. After more than 75 years of fighting against hostile neighbors, the tiny Jewish country, which is about the size of Goa, has pretty much vanquished all of its enemies. Whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, and now Iran itself, the one that is the fount of all terror backing in the Middle East. This exercise of raw military power has allowed Israel, for the very first time since its creation in 1948, a future that is free of any immediate terror threats. The risk of a nuclear Iran is severely diminished. Israel has stable, if uneasy, relations with other Gulf Arab states,
and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cemented his partnership with US President Donald Trump. The new reality in Israel is that a place which was once under constant threat from Lebanon and Syria or even Gaza will now be more secure than Washington. The next phase of this war will be decided at the White House this week when Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu meet. This will be their third meeting in the last 5 months since Trump came to office. Trump had already announced last week a 60-day ceasefire, which he said was up to both Israel and Hamas to implement on the ground. He will be pushing both parties to implement the ceasefire because he is the one who's helped broker it.
I think there's a good chance we have a deal with Hamas during the coming week.
Both Israel and Hamas have cautiously welcomed the ceasefire, but both sides are also holding close to their chest what their respective priorities are. One round of informal talks mediated by Qatar ended inconclusively. For Israel, its priority is about rescuing the remaining hostages. There are around 20 of them who are still in Hamas custody. For Hamas, it is about a complete cessation of hostilities, which Israel is reluctant to concede. Israel fears that Hamas will only use this pause just to regroup and attack Israel again. But the bigger concern for Israel is what comes next in Gaza. Hamas has been massively weakened, no question about it, but not to the point where it's going to give up power. Israel's failure has also been that it has failed to imagine a possible political successor to Hamas, which can fill the political and governance vacuum in a post-war Gaza. But it's also come at an immense cost to Israel's standing in the rest of the world. Netanyahu's relentless and unapologetic military campaign in response to the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack, in which over 1,000 Israelis were killed and over 250 Israeli hostages were taken into custody, that has now pretty much cemented Israel's position in the world as a pariah of sorts. Very few Western countries, save the United States, back Israel in multiple UN resolutions. Israel's leadership is accused of genocide and war crimes. Netanyahu has an ICC arrest warrant against him. His travel has been curtailed because of that. He's in fact disdained by many world leaders, so much so that countries have now started beginning to recognize an independent state of Palestine. In opinion polls globally, most people today have a negative view of Israel. In Gaza, the war against Hamas has taken a devastating toll. Tens of thousands have been killed, millions more have been left homeless and hungry. Much of the enclave has been reduced to rubble. Poverty and hopelessness are rampant in Gaza. Hundreds of Israeli soldiers have also been killed in these last almost 2 years. In fact, officials also believe there are about 20 living hostages who are still in Hamas custody after more than 600 days in captivity. Israel's actions have shattered a rock-solid bipartisan consensus in the United States for defending Israel. Now, support for Israel has become a fiercely contentious issue in Congress. It is also a subject of angry debates and protests on college campuses. In fact, the political climate around the question of Israel and support for Israel in the United States has become deeply polarized. Many supporters of Israel denounce any criticism as anti-Semitic, and those who are opposed to Israel view themselves not to be silenced, whether in Congress or in college campuses. Inside Israel, the decision to prioritize the military campaign over the return of hostages has also deeply wounded many people, and the violence has strained the goodwill of the country's allies and its neighbors. Yet, many Israelis welcome the prospect of a future in which they are no longer surrounded by well-armed enemies who are determined for the destruction of Israel, even if that means that the rest of the world views Israel in a negative point of view. In a Pew Research survey of 24 countries around the world, which was published last month, negative opinions about Israel have surged. In 20 out of these 24 countries, more than half of the people in those countries had an unfavorable view of Israel. In 8 of those countries, which includes Australia, Japan, Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and Turkey, more than 75% of the respondents in the survey viewed Israel in a negative fashion. For Israel, the ripple effects have been felt in the Persian Gulf, where even before the October 7th attack, countries like Saudi Arabia appeared willing to establish full and formal diplomatic and economic ties with Israel. In fact, it had normalized ties through the Abraham Accords with the UAE and Bahrain, and it was only a matter of time before the same happened with Saudi Arabia. Now, though,
most analysts believe that the hopes for normal ties, certainly between Riyadh and Tel Aviv, have been set back substantially. The Gulf countries view the idea of normal diplomatic ties and the resolution of the Palestinian issue as interlinked. That resolution, the possible two-state solution, is now ever more distant than ever before. Israel's diplomatic outlook in the region may not be all that grim. They have an ally and a friend in the White House. They're negotiating currently with the new government in Syria about a possible truce. And once this Gaza war ends, there is still the possibility of normalization with Saudi Arabia, which could be back on the table. Just 46% of Americans in the latest Gallup survey have expressed open support for Israel. That's the lowest number since this survey began about a quarter of a century ago on this very question. In fact, most of the respondents in the US have sympathized with the plight of Palestinians. It's gone up from just 13% to over 50%. They underscore an undeniable shift in public opinion about Israel around the world and also in the United States. Many surveys in America have found that non-Jewish Americans actually sympathize with Palestinians. And many Jews on campuses say that they feel ostracized and socially isolated. So much so, in 2024, Spain, Norway, and Ireland became the first Western countries to formally recognize a Palestinian state. It is largely a symbolic gesture that is designed to pressure Israel to end the fighting in Gaza. But if more and more Western countries, which are expected to follow suit until the war in Gaza ends, well, that will put immense pressure on the Netanyahu government, on the foreign brand ambassadors of Israel, and hopefully this war will end before it closes in, since 2 years since the fighting began. That's going to be later this year in October. But it all begins with that White House meeting this week. All right, joining us now is Kevin Liptak. He's a CNN White House correspondent. He's joining us just ahead of this meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Thanks, Kevin, for speaking with us. President Trump is, of course, hopeful of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. He's hoping to clinch that in this White House meeting later today. What exactly does his proposal entail?
Yeah, and this is a proposal that the U.S. has endorsed and that the Israeli side and Hamas are still working to hammer out the details on. It would be a 60-day truce that would involve a phased release of hostages, both the ones who are still living and the bodies of those which are deceased. Hamas and Israel have both agreed, I guess, in theory to the framework of the deal, but they're still working to hammer out some of the specifics. They're having what's called proximity talks in Qatar this week. Essentially, the two sides are in the same building and passing messages through a mediator as they work to finalize this deal. President Trump has made very clear that he wants to see this done quickly. He told us last night that he thinks this agreement could be finalized this week, and he is putting a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to agree to its terms. The president, I think, feels as if Netanyahu owes him somewhat. After the U.S. conducted those strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities, after President Trump came out and endorsed Netanyahu against some of these criminal charges that he's facing in Israel, calling on them to be dropped, really kind of an unprecedented foray into Israel's domestic politics. There is a sense, I think, at the White House that Netanyahu needs to agree to this deal so that President Trump can come out and say that he helped achieve peace in Gaza. And so a lot for these men to discuss when they sit down today. I should note that as of now, we aren't expected to actually see them meeting. They're having a closed press dinner this evening, but for now there's no photo op, which I think tells you sort of the business-like nature of this meeting. President Trump very much wanting to impart on Netanyahu the importance of reaching this deal in Gaza.
Kevin, you were talking a moment ago about these indirect talks between Hamas and Israel mediated by Qatar. The first edition of that, or the first tranche of that, ended inconclusively over the weekend. Is that going to be an impediment into whether or not this deal will actually come through, the 60-day ceasefire which President Trump and the White House have proposed? And do we know why it ended inconclusively? What was the sticking point?
Yeah, we don't know what the sticking points are at this point. Obviously, these two sides have been at odds for quite a long time. Hamas has made clear that it wants any ceasefire proposal to include a provision for ending the war permanently. Israel has stopped short of endorsing that, saying that it needs to continue its mission in Gaza until Hamas is eliminated there. Those two sides have not yet been bridged in previous iterations of these ceasefire talks, and it appears as if that will still be a sticking point going forward. I think the question now and the difference now is the enormous amount of pressure that is now on Israel by the United States to come to some sort of agreement. So these two sides are continuing to talk. The proximity talks are still underway in Qatar. And I think the question is whether President Trump, in his meetings with Netanyahu today, will impress on him the necessity to get this agreement done. And if Netanyahu then goes to his negotiators and says, yes, you need to agree to this deal. I think in the view of the White House and in the view of the Americans, there's no question that this is an agreement that needs to be struck very, very quickly. Clearly, President Trump has made evident his views on this matter. The question I think that is also outstanding is whether Hamas can sort of agree to all of the details that Israel has in its proposal frameworks. For instance, the idea that IDF forces, the Israeli military, would still be present in a buffer zone in Gaza. There are all these provisions in this deal that so far the two sides in previous negotiations haven't yet come to an agreement on. This is by far the furthest I think that these talks have gone, at least in recent months. There does appear to be fresh momentum, and I think at the White House the goal really is to ride that momentum into a final agreement.
All right, Kevin Liptak reporting for us live tonight from the White House. Thank you very much for joining us with your thoughts and perspective into the expected meeting between President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu at the White House.
Dangerously. This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Let's begin with our top focus story now. This is a CNN News 18 mega exclusive. This is on the rift between Pakistan's political class and terror groups, with the Pakistani army now seemingly supporting the former Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. Now, why are we saying that? This is as per top intelligence sources that have suggested to CNN News 18 that Bilawal's recent stance on extraditing designated terrorists like Hafiz Saeed and Masood Azhar to India suggests a consensus within Pakistan's political leadership. Sources have also suggested that the political class, including Bilawal's Pakistan People's Party, is striving for international legitimacy, particularly in compliance with the FATF mandates. And sources are also indicative of the fact that Bilawal has highlighted the dismantling of over 900 terror groups and institutions and asset seizures, and also arrests as evidence of Pakistan's changing stance. Now, despite Pakistan's efforts, sources are also revealing that the groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed have historically served as tools for plausible deniability in Kashmir operations. So big development there that is coming in from Pakistan, where there seems to be a great divide when it is about the consensus on whether to support terror infrastructure, terror groups, and what has been the recent stance of Bilawal Bhutto Zardari.
इंटरनेशनल न्यूज़ चैनल को इंटरव्यू देते हुए बिलावल ने जो बातें की, भारतीय सहाफ़ी के सवालात के जो जवाबात दिए, हकीकत में वो जवाब बनते नहीं थे, जिससे हम सब की पूरी पाकिस्तानी कौम की दिल आज़ारी हुई है। लेकिन आज हमारे सियासतदान उनके मुंह में ज़ुबान दुश्मनों की हो और वो किसी भी पाकिस्तानी को दुश्मन के यानी हिंदुस्तान के हवाले करने की ऑफर्स करते फिरें, चे जाए कि पाकिस्तान की एक मोतबर शख्सियत मेरे वालिद मोहतरम हाफिज़ मोहम्मद सईद हफिज़हुल्लाह के बारे में ये अंदाज और ये बातें इख्तियार की जाएं।
Let me take this across to our colleague Anand Narsiman, who is joining us live from the CNN News 18 newsroom. Anand, we were just playing out that reaction of Hafiz Saeed's son. He is, of course, dissing this entire stance by Bilawal Bhutto, but Zardari's stance has found a lot of support in Pakistan. How does one dissect this dynamics, particularly with the power play when it is to do with the Pakistan army?
Good afternoon, Grehan. Good afternoon to our viewers. How firmly are the army, the political establishment and the terror networks entwined with each other in Pakistan is evident from the fact that Hafiz Saeed's son, a proscribed terrorist, and his organization's de facto leader now, that's also a proscribed terrorist organization, Lashkar-e-Taiba's de facto leader, Talha Saeed, Hafiz Saeed's son, sits there and takes Bilal's name as in first name. Talks to him as if he is some ordinary person on whom he can put a target and he can take him out. He is Bilal Bhutto, the former foreign minister of Pakistan. He comes from the entire Bhutto family, and this is how these terror tanzeems consider Pakistani politicians. And look at the tone that's adopted. And he's sitting there and overtly trying to threaten Bilal Bhutto for taking Hafiz Saeed's name and saying that if there are nations that want their extradition for terror acts of terror, then we will be amenable to it. The crux of this is that there is clearly friction now between the polity, the army and also the terror tanzeems. Some of these terror tanzeems now are beyond their use date and beyond their sell-by date, and perhaps the Pakistani military establishment wants the name. Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to the Hard Facts. I'm Anand Narsimhan. Amid the opposition versus poll panel fight, the Election Commission has relaxed norms for the Bihar's voter list revision, allowing documents to be submitted later. The Bihar Chief Electoral Officer made the announcement through newspaper ads, urging voters to respond promptly when contacted by booth-level officers. Now, this move follows strong objections from 11 opposition parties who met the Election Commission, calling the timing of the revision just months ahead of the elections in Bihar a threat to democracy. The Congress has gone a step further, accusing the Election Commission of colluding with the BJP to disenfranchise voters, especially the poor, Dalit and backward communities. While the Election Commission says the revision is meant to address urbanization and migration, the opposition claims the document requirements are too restrictive, excluding common IDs like Aadhaar and voter cards. Now, this fight is headed to the Honorable Supreme Court as well, where the arguments will face the test of legal scrutiny. The first round of hearings is scheduled for the 10th of July. Now, different parties have made arguments against the Election Commission's move. The AIMIM stand is people won't just miss vote but will face livelihood issues too. The Election Commission has responded saying the crackdown is needed on illegal immigrants from other countries. The RJD stand, stakeholders not consulted before taking decision by the Election Commission. The EC responds saying more than half the voters have submitted forms already. The Congress's stand, devious and dubious, move to willfully exclude voters from the list. The Election Commission's response, opposition questioned Maharashtra rules, had to act before the Bihar polls. Trinamool Congress's stand, akin to NRC exercise, aimed to target West Bengal polls next year. The EC's response, revision of electoral rolls aims to restore trust of the public and the parties. The CPM, their charge, 1 month is not enough for voters to submit identification documents. The EC's response, decision is in accordance with Article 326 that ensures adult suffrage. We got more news. The Election Commission, despite the attack from the opposition, the EC has now laid out some numbers. They have said 2.88 crore or about 36.47% of the enumeration forms have been collected already. 11.26% have been uploaded on the ECI website itself. 1.18 crore forms were collected in the past 24 hours. 77,895 block level officers are going house to house to help the electors fill out their enumeration forms and collect them. Additionally, 20,603 BLOs are being appointed for the smooth and timely completion of the process. Nearly 4 lakh volunteers that include government officials, NCC cadets, NSS members are also working on the field to facilitate the elderly, sick and also the vulnerable populations in this entire SIR process. 1,54,977 booth-level agents appointed by the various political parties are also providing active support in this entire SIR process. Arunima now joins us with more. So the Election Commission saying we are going by the book. There is no aji-baji. Do you think they will be able to answer the courts as well, Arunima?
See, 2-3 things that Election Commission of India is likely to tell the courts. First thing, why was this SIR necessary? All political parties, starting with Congress and its supporters, raised questions about the electoral rolls in Maharashtra and then subsequently in Haryana. As far as TMC is concerned, they raised concern about the EPIC or the election iCard itself, saying there's a duplicity. So what Election Commission of India officials and CEC Ganesh Kumar himself has said that there was a need to restore faith of people because there was this perception that was being built by opposition that the election results are not what the people are wanting. There's some kind of a fraud that is being played out. In order to put to rest any such perception, this SIR was required, and because Bihar is the first state that is going to polls since Maharashtra, since Haryana, Bihar became the sample case. That's the first thing that they're going to tell the Supreme Court. Second, they're going to say that this is mandated by the Constitution, and what we are doing is exactly what constitutional mandate says. Check whether somebody is an Indian citizen and check whether that person is 18 years of age or not. Of course, all the other questions that are being raised, that 2.8 crore or more than 2.5 crore voters will be disenfranchised, EC is putting out data to suggest that this is ill-founded.
Right. Arunima, thank you for your inputs. Going straight across to the former CEC, Om Prakash Rawatji, who's joining us. Om Prakash Rawatji, namaste, Jai Hind, thank you for your time. My first question, could you please explain to our viewers this entire process of Special Intensive Revision or SIR? When is it undertaken? And the fact that parties have now approached the Honorable Supreme Court regarding the same.
I think Supreme Court will decide on merits. What I want to tell is that it is mandated for Election Commission to hold either summary revision or intensive revision before every election, so that electoral roll comes in line for that election. Since the Bihar elections will be held in November, so electoral roll must have all the names who qualify to be voter on 1st of October 2025. And therefore, a revision was necessitated. Earlier, it was only one date, 1st January of every year. So if in that year elections are being held, revision will be required only if it is not revised on 1st January. Otherwise, no revision will be required. But now these dates have changed to 4. 1st January, 1st April, 1st July and 1st October. And therefore revision was necessitated because of this. So Election Commission was well within the mandated role to announce this. Only thing is that instead of summary revision, they wanted intensive revision this time. And political parties are objecting to limited time of 3 months before elections and the possibility of many people getting disenfranchised. But the way Election Commission is doing it, it appears that these accusations are not really well founded. They have given almost the same time, which is given in intensive revision before 2002, 2003. So I think that it is in order, and whatever steps they have taken will ensure that draft roll will contain all the names who submit their forms, and that would satisfy the people.
But O.P. Rawatji, there are accusations being made against the Election Commission that this exercise is intended to remove certain voters such as scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, Dalits, Muslims who are likely to vote for the opposition. Are these accusations fair?
I don't think, because all these people, if they are aged, their name would be on 2003 electoral roll. 65% voter are in that roll, and they don't have to submit any document, nothing. Their case will be decided immediately, and they will be in the roll. Only remaining 35% votes. Now these percentages include everyone. These are not selective. So all sections of society are included. Remaining 35% votes, for them, Election Commission has opened the window that you may submit these one of these documents now, and if you don't have, you just sign the form and submit. You can submit these papers, these documents, either by the time this draft roll is published, or even after that.
After that.
When claims and objections are being decided during the month of August. Even then, if you submit, electoral registration officer will take cognizance of these papers and will ensure that your names figure there. Even after that, if suppose somebody's name is struck off, despite the fact that he was earlier in the electoral roll, he voted for an election, say in 2019 or 2014, then he will have an option of appeal. So there are too many safeguards.
Yeah, there are safeguards, but is there enough time to actually implement or avail of those safeguards? Many are worried about nearly 2 crore voters being struck off this entire list. How many of these individuals will have sufficient time to address this issue? What are your thoughts on this? Is it possible that nearly 2 crore voters could be struck off the list, Mr. Rawat?
That is totally baseless, that 2 crore voter will be struck off. How can they be struck off? I told you that 5 crore voters are already in, because they are in 2003 voter list. Now remaining 2.79 or 2.97, whatever it is, they have to provide one of these documents, either birth certificate or land ownership document or some service document or something, to prove that they have been living here, they are citizens here, and that's it. If suppose they don't get this, there are other ways that they can prove that their parents were living here, their names were in 2003 voter list, and their connection to their parents is this, that they were born to only these parents. So even that will be working. So there are so many options, so many ways to prove that they are citizen and they have been living here. Only problem will be with those people who are, say, 45 years of age, never registered, whose parents are never registered. They will have problem, but because they have already not registered since age is, why crib now?
No, but Mr. Rawat, my next question is two-part. One, could there be illegal immigrants, illegals also, who could have made their way into the voter list by acquiring Aadhaar cards, ration cards, etc.? The other part is it's assembly elections. So the constituency margins, 2,000-3,000 votes here and there of the voter list could be the decisive favor between a victor or a vanquished. Now, are these concerns misplaced or genuine?
Yeah, these apprehensions I can't address because these are political. And people who have illegally migrated to India, if they have some document to prove their citizenship here, they will be in. But if they have no document, because Aadhaar is not a proof of citizenship. So that's that. If they can prove that they are citizen, they were born here, they had land here, they have other documents, they can prove and they will be in. Otherwise, they will not be in.
But are you confident the EC's endeavor, the SIR, will stand the test of legal scrutiny? Matters up in court?
That Supreme Court will take a call on this, because all facts must be before Supreme Court, and Honorable Supreme Court will do the hearing, I think, on Thursday, and then they'll take a call, and we all have to obey or comply with the Honorable Supreme Court's order.
Everyone will have to comply, or will they continue to crib? Mr. O.P. Rawat, thank you for your time. Let's take this straight into the debate. Shazia Almi, National Spokesperson of the BJP with us. Dr. Anand Ranganathan, author, commentator, and also scientist with us, a self-professed Darwinian atheist, if I may say. Good to have you here. Akash Deepmuni, political analyst, also with us. My namaste to everybody. Shazia Almi, क्या कर रहे हैं आप? चुनाव जीतने के लिए आप वोटर लिस्ट ही हटा देंगे? The Election Commission is working with the BJP. 9 opposition parties are up at arms already.
देखिए, सबसे बड़ा सवाल यहाँ पे ये है, आदाब आप सबको नमस्कार, कि कितनी बार वही कहानी घिसी पिटा राग जो है आप सुनाएंगे और लोगों को गुमराह करेंगे अपनी नाकामियों को छुपाने के लिए. Now clearly this whole narrative is being bandied around only to deflect and seek and be some kind of an alibi for the future defeat that RJD awaits. Now, why malign the EC again and again? Now, it's been made very clear. You've had a detailed conversation with the officer there who told you exactly how this process works. It's routine, it's transparent, it's a statutory process and an institution. Now, why do you want to muddy the waters every time? So, and you look at 8 crore voters, 243 assembly constituencies, you look at the electoral polls being revised, you look at deletions of deceased, people who have migrated and have their voter cards elsewhere, and you look at various proofs. Why on earth, with such a narrative, do the rounds already, except to give them